Okay, looks like we've got some people coming in now. Welcome to those of you who are just arriving. Looks like people just starting to trickle in slowly, so we won't kick off just yet. But thank you for coming if you're just arriving to the Love of Data webinar. I think we've got just under 100 people joining us this evening, so slowly ticking up there. We're going to hold on just a little while until we have the room full, and then we'll kick things off. Exciting stuff. I know I'm excited. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's excited. Welcome, folks, if you've just arrived with us. Looks like we've still got a few people to come. Got some really exciting conversations we're going to have this evening, so I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, looks like we can get started. So thank you for joining us at this evening's webinar for the Love of Data with Coder Academy. My name's Oliver. I'm one of the lead educators for Coder Academy, teaching Python, which is a really crucial language for data science. So this is a topic close to my heart this evening. We've got some really exciting panelists who will be joining us tonight. I'll get a little slide of them going for you. Here we go. So we have Anthony Mackerly from Census, and who many people may know from COVID Live. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Anthony. Anthony's been a business intelligence and reporting manager at Census for upwards of 15 years. And in 2020, he discovered a lack of real-time collated COVID data, and this led to him creating the COVID Live website, for which you may have heard about him in the media. It collates information from various health departments and media releases, and it's now an official data source for international bodies like Johns Hopkins University, Our World in Data, and Google. We'll also be joined this evening by Dr. Arwen Griffiths. Dr. Griffiths is the machine learning manager at Zendesk Melbourne, where she leads the team responsible for producing AnswerBot, which you may have heard of. She's passionate about improving the status of underrepresented groups in STEM fields, discussing the ethics of AI and applying machine learning to make the world a little better. She holds a PhD in machine learning with a minor in eco-informatics. And when she's not in front of a computer desk, you can probably find her on roller skates at the local rink with her family or in the CBD. Our third guest for this evening is Samanve Karambi. Samanve has worn many hats, including that of a data scientist, a startup co-founder, an aerospace engineer at the German Space Agency, a space camp leader, University of Sydney representative at the Youth Assembly, the UN Youth Assembly that is, and a language teacher. And since 2019, he's held the role of data scientist at Nearmap, where he's part of the AI systems team. Very shortly, he'll be starting a new role at Woolies X at the start of August. And our fourth panelist for this evening is Natasha Ford. Natasha is a machine learning specialist solution architect, and she's based in Sydney, Australia. She helps organizations navigate their machine learning journey, supporting them from framing machine learning problems to deploying into production, and all the while making sure that the best architectural practices are in place to ensure their success. Drawing on experience from her previous role as an AI machine learning architect in a consulting firm, designing and implementing machine learning projects in a wide range of industries, from telecoms and retail to governments and healthcare, Natasha aims to support organizations building scalable, reliable, secure, and cost-effective machine learning solutions. So that's four really exciting names that we have with us this evening. I'm really stoked to hear what they've got to talk to us about, and I've got some questions that I can't wait to ask them. Next to those names, I feel a little bit dwarfed, so I'm really happy to be here as an educator for Coder Academy. We also will be, I'll be helped out this evening by Dallas Hill, who's another one of our Coder Academy staff. Hi, Dallas.
Hey,
Dallas is going to be giving us just a little introduction in a moment, and he's also going to be monitoring the chat this evening. So perhaps I'll hand over to Dallas quickly for him to give us a little bit of housekeeping information.
Cool. Thank you so much, Oliver. So once again, my name's Dallas. I'm one of the enrollment advisors here at Coder Academy. So I just wanted to sort of advise you of, Coder Academy and who we are. Essentially, we're an alternative institute, for learning to become a developer. So we have a few different courses available, but essentially we've been sort of in the boot camp game for a good couple of years now. We were actually one of the first companies to bring boot camps to Australia from San Francisco. And essentially we're doing quite well, and we're the leading bootcamp provider at the moment. And if you want to learn more, check out our website at coderacademy.edu.au. Other than that, a little bit of housekeeping for tonight is you might find in the chat that you've got a few options for who you can speak to. What I get you to do is actually choose, if you're on the new Zoom, choose everyone instead of hosts and panelists. Or if you have an updated Zoom, it might say panelists, and you can change that one to panelists and attendees. That way, if you ever ask a question in there, everyone gets to see the questions and everyone gets to see the answers as well. So feel free to ask questions as we're going along tonight in the chat, and I may be able to answer them as we're sort of going. But if I can't, I will be putting them aside and we'll be asking our panelists, towards the end. So make sure to let me know who you want me to ask the question to. Cool. Thanks for that. Over to you, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Dallas. So folks, the first panelist that I'll be speaking to this evening is Anthony Mackley. Anthony, you've got some pretty prestigious qualifications behind you, and you've done some amazing work in the field of data science, as have all of our panelists this evening. And I think when students are kind of looking forward to their future careers, they kind of see themselves as typically moving through that kind of standard path towards employment, where you get picked up by a small firm or a large firm, and eventually your job is to work in larger and larger and more prestigious firms. But you personally have done some private work, and that's kind of what has got you on the world stage at the moment. As an individual, you've had some amazing success. Would you recommend that aspiring data scientists look to strike out on their own? Do you think that the path to success can be found in private individual work?
Hi, Oliver. Hello, everyone. The pandemic was an interesting experience. When I first started COVID Live back last year in March, I had no idea this journey would take me. I've always sort of done side projects, just to learn. So I always recommend people, in work, you're probably restricted in the environments with your corporate job, with what data you use and some of the technology. I was very lucky at Census. We always changed applications and programs every 4 years. So I was keeping up. But, if there's something that you're really passionate about, data or something you want to try, a new technology or a new code, definitely recommend doing something on your own. Just make up a little passion project of yours. And that's really how COVID Live started. And then just from then on, it's crazy sort of the opportunities that rose from that. I think it sort of exposed a niche where government data, how just regular people trying to access government data and understand it. I think everyone became familiar with certain things like case numbers, test numbers, source of infection data, but there was definitely a missing link, and something probably a lot of the media and journalists was missing was how to explain that well, without putting, headlines, this many cases, watch out, it's spiking and things like that. So, doing it, someone in data analysis, it isn't just about the raw crunching or coding or the technical side, but also understanding the context of the data, and really a sort of median in between the user. How do I first deliver that in a really easy, digestible format, but also explain it? And I think that's where probably a lot of my audience grew anyway through COVID Live. I was always there to try and explain the data. How does this work? Even today, what are cases infectious in the community and things like that. And really I also at the same time through this process exposed a lot of gaps. The formats working with government data aren't great. They're still putting out PDFs and things like that today. So it was much easier to push for change when I sort of had that audience. And that was really just explaining data to people for over a year and a half.
I think that's going to be a bit of a through line this evening. Some of the conversations that I've had with people recently have really focused on the fact that when we think about data science, we often think about crunching numbers and mathematics and being a bit of an egghead, the matrix screen of descending digits. But in fact, the recurring theme that I see is that there's a lot of communication, a lot of so-called soft skills that are really vital to the work of a data scientist. Would you say that that's been something that surprised you in your career? Have you found that there's been more communication than you expected?
Yeah, absolutely. And technology changes the same. Applications that use in businesses always change. So sort of a bit of learning curve for everyone, different data sets, different formats. I see it all as a package. It's not just the data crunching and all that. It's even going back to try to understand how applications work, extracting it through the data crunching and the mathematics, and then passing it on to the end user. So, in an ideal world, you want to try and have all of those skills. You might start off in a certain stream. You might just start off in the technical stream, or you might start off even just, the explaining and the context of the data. There's so many incredible online resources and the boot camps you guys are running. I'm sure, you can get up to speed on all those kind of things, but just want to ensure everyone, I know it might be scary stepping out of your stream, but there's so many incredible resources online and everywhere. I'm sure you can do it.
That's definitely something we focus on at Coder Academy. Absolutely. I think the key realization that happened for me was that when I was learning about data science, or when I was like inspecting data or doing the so-called crunching of numbers, what I was really doing was explaining to myself a certain concept, and that would equip me to communicate that to people who needed to use the data. So yeah, we're definitely looking at that as a rich seam to follow at Coder Academy. And speaking of which, I think data is becoming more and more vital in a lot of businesses. I mean, that's clear from the way that the world's reacted to the pandemic, and we've seen some giant changes in the way that people live. To your knowledge, how has the pandemic and the shift to working from home impacted the ways in which governments and organizations harvest data and deal with data?
I think the pandemic's definitely put data on show, just in the mainstream. I don't think a lot of people really realize the power of data, or especially with the pandemic, how much it impacted on real lives. Probably if you're in a big tech firm or anything like that, you're using it every day, you're collecting a lot, but just, normal small businesses, things like that, they probably haven't got, a data warehouse or business intelligence platform set up. But with being just exposed to COVID every day, even all the media outlets, the governments created their own dashboards. So people were getting that exposure and probably realizing what the power of data that exists. So I think also with COVID and the pandemic, obviously there's a few privacies and liberties that we've sort of had to give up. Really just, everyone's trying to do the right thing and contain outbreaks and so like that. So, QR codes weren't a big thing, and now they're absolutely everywhere. You can imagine how much data that they're harvesting every day, but that's so important to, for example, if there is an outbreak at a supermarket or a cafe, they can contact people almost immediately. It's good to see every state health department even have their own app, which didn't exist at the start of the pandemic. So, they've made a lot of roadways in that respect. I think, so just with that, I think we're in quite an amazing age too, we can collect all these data sources, but we can also process it and query it like never before. I remember 10 years ago having to run a report, and you'd run it before lunch, you'd execute a script before lunch, and you'd go for lunch and come back and you'd still be waiting for the results. At the moment, it's kind of unlimited with what data you can use, how quickly we can query it, and also how quickly you can expand it. I think the pandemic's really just put data on show and just highlighted, how powerful it is.
And presumably that's created some significant growth in the industry, with so much more data to look at and with so many more reasons to look at it. Do you think that there's likely to be a continuing increase in the demand for data scientists?
Absolutely. I think most companies are going to realize now, as I was saying with the pandemic, how much data exists out there and how much they can actually store and collect. They're going to need people to, easy to just dump it in a warehouse. But the next step is what do you do with it? How do I analyze it? How do I drive valuable insights from it? Even some of the work I've done with this, I'm getting these questions from people, outside the COVID stuff where they didn't really think about much data, or they just had spreadsheets lying around. The really next step is to sort of get deep down at the level and start driving insights from it. And I just think people didn't probably realize, even trying to play out how long's a lockdown going to go or things like that. And they start thinking, all right, if we had this data in my organization, how can I try to drive forecasts or things like that? So it's definitely put data on the world stage.
Definitely, in a big way. And you've just touched a little bit on the kind of roles that data's played in tackling the pandemic in Australia and elsewhere. But can you think of, when we think about the ways that data is used, we're often thinking about things like contact tracing, which is a really concrete way that it gets used. It sounds though as well, though, that there's quite a bit of modeling that's going on behind the scenes in governmental organizations and things like that, to which perhaps individual people watching the news don't have a great deal of access. Do you see it as having had a really formative role in the response of governments to COVID?
I think they've definitely had to become more transparent with a lot of things. So I remember one of the big pushes I did last year in the Vic second wave was just trying to get postcode data, like cases by postcode and LGA. And what I realized, probably the biggest takeaway from my experience with all the COVID live things was, no matter how bad the numbers were or all the news, it still gave people a sort of sense of control, being able to see the numbers and just get them in a sort of a consistent manner. It was, for a long part of last year, you'd have to tune into a press conference to get the numbers, which was just ridiculous. So, I think it really helped sort of temper some of the anxiety, which still exists now, but I think the governments realized how important the messaging and how well they sort of communicate that data played a part. And even things like people waking up in the morning and saying, all right, this many cases, these are linked, this is the situation. I think it really impacts a lot of people. Probably from the more technical side, I think one of the great things even we're seeing now, starting to see more things like targets. So we have vaccination targets, 78% targets. Last year, Victoria had a roadmap out. New South Wales are probably thinking about something similar right now. There's something you see in businesses every day. You have KPIs and tracking against KPIs. And I think probably the government don't realize, but can really encourage a lot of engagement. If they had that target and they tracked it every day in the numbers, and that's probably one of the most popular parts of my site today, which is how many days until we hit 70%. And that's no forecasting or modeling. That's just based off what our current rate is. I mean, that might encourage someone, what, I'm going to go get vaccinated, or I'm going to tell my family and friends to get vaccinated. It's not just the data, but I think overall the data comms sharing that, they probably didn't think it was much. They probably only did it because they had to. But now I think they've realized it has a real societal impact, and it can shape how we respond to outbreaks. It can shape vaccination rates. There's so many more than just the simple, QR, who logged in at this QR at the time.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty clear that it isn't just an extra piece of information. Data can almost act like an extra sense on a societal level. And I think that's definitely going to change the way that we work with it in the future. As a matter of fact, I think that leads in quite neatly to a question that I have for Dr. Griffion. So I might direct my next question to Dr. Alwyn Griffion, if that's okay. Doctor, you've been doing some pretty amazing work in the field of natural language processing with the Answer bot. And I understand that in your PhD, you made some novel advances in the science of species distribution modeling, which is conservation science. Normally, the kind of work that we think about doing with data science is quite bookish. It's numbers and letters and kind of classical data, but your work seems to revolve around things that we consider to be the domain of people, things like conversations and plants and animals. Do you think that we're going to see a gradual increase in the relevance of data science to everyday life in that way?
Absolutely, absolutely. So really one of the appeals for me in machine learning was that the domain of application is pretty much infinite. So you can come up with some way to numerically represent just about any sort of thing in the world, even if it's just to assign a simple number to it. As we get more savvy about collecting all of this data and seeing more of these really impactful, positive applications, I think that it is going to creep more and more into our life. One of the things that we all take for granted right now is probably if you go on your web browser and it's Chrome and you come across a foreign language site, let's say you're trying to cook some amazing Malaysian food, but you don't read any of those languages, you can just right click and translate, right? The whole world is right there. And it's all accessible to you. And all of that is powered by machine learning and AI.
It's a really cool application. And I think one of the most beautiful things about it is that it doesn't seem to intrude greatly into one's experience of the world. Instead, it seems to just facilitate.
That should be how it works. Like, if you think about it, ML is a tool and it should be enabling our lives, not controlling or directing our lives. And so the uses of it should be positive and enriching rather than, you know, invasive and terrifying, like some of the facial recognition technology that's being used by police departments, etc.
That was one thing that really struck me when I was reading up on your work, was that it was a stark contrast to some of the dystopian fiction that I'd been reading lately about AI and machine learning. I thought it painted a really nice picture about what could be done in a perfect world with machine learning.
Yeah.
We talked about that being sort of a gradual increase, but I think we've definitely seen some pretty rapid advancements in the last 10 years. Anthony was just talking about how 10 years ago, things were a lot harder and a lot less powerful. Do you think perhaps we might see some quite rapid increases in the way that we interact with data?
I think that we are, and I think it's going to come in sort of fits and starts. So the field of ML has been around since the 1950s, and we've gone through various phases of what we call AI winters, right? So the hype picks up, everybody wants in on it, governments start funding the research, universities focus on it. We push it to a certain level, and then that sort of hype fades off. And then there's a few people, you know, squirreling away in the background until they come up with, you know, another big breakthrough that raises the hype. And recently that was deep learning. And it wasn't that deep learning was particularly novel, it was the hardware technology that made it accessible and easy for people. So, you know, I'm sure that this is going to taper off a bit as well. But this particular advancement and then the integration of technology in our lives, I think is pretty much ensured that it's going to be incorporated in all parts of our lives going forward. Everybody is carrying a supercomputer in their pocket, right? And we're even starting to drive them around in our, you know, on our streets, which is terrifying, but that's another conversation. So I don't think it's gradual. I think it's pretty pervasive. And I think it's going to probably maintain this level of pervasiveness for the foreseeable future.
I think that's kind of exciting, especially, well,
Yes and no. Yes and no.
I think at least it's a good time to be data literate, let's say.
It is.
Speaking of data literacy, you've published multiple papers, you've got multiple patents to your name and a PhD, and you've seen some pretty significant success in the corporate world. I think that's fair of quite a few of our panelists this evening as well. Do you have any advice for people who are just starting out in the industry? What's the best way to break into data science, do you think?
There's so many ways to break in. There really are. So yes, I took quite a traditional path. I did the computer science and mathematics undergrad, and then I had a wicked bout of imposter syndrome and thought there was no way that I was at all capable to work as a software engineer. Therefore, I must get a PhD. I apologize. I have a very loud cat. And the imposter syndrome, coupled with what is essentially a contrarian nature. I was told that girls don't do machine learning, so I did machine learning.
Awesome.
You don't have to do that, though. I think that it depends on your perspective. If you're a really good storyteller, that's great for data science, because that's what we're doing, is trying to tell a story about some giant blob of information, which is totally meaningless in its raw form. If you're, if you're really logical and you like computation, come join us in data science. The other thing is that not everybody is designing algorithms these days, right? So my background is in actual machine learning, algorithmic design, doing the mathematical derivations and all of this. There's not a lot of that happening these days, and especially not in industry. So if you're not going to work for Facebook AI Research or Bell Labs or something like that, you need a comfort with packages and with learning and adapting things, and finding a way to find the problem that you're trying to get a solution for, right? So with AnswerBot, for example, it was, how many times do our poor human agent have to answer, how do I reset my password, when there is 5 help center articles that are right there, right? It's a really easy question. We can automate these things. And so identifying those problems and then matching them up to the appropriate off-the-shelf tool or package is a completely powerful way of getting into data science.
Absolutely. And it sounds as though that might be quite a comforting thought to people out there who see a sort of quite a steep path of learning as the only way in, that there's absolutely other paths in. For instance, if you can find one problem that you're interested in and pick up a little bit of work to work on that. Anthony's shown us the power of a side project. I think it perhaps becomes quite clear then that just a little bit of learning can be your foot in the door. That's good
really
to hear.
Can be. It really
Definitely.
can be.
You talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and people talking about women don't do machine learning. Representation and inclusivity is something that's close to my heart, and it sounds like it's something that you're pretty interested in as well. We're seeing more women than ever working in IT, and particularly in Australia, I think there have been some major firms that have started to make some great strides towards balancing the gender ratio. But it's clear that industry still has some work to do there. What do you hope to see for women in the industry in the next few years?
What do I hope to see? What do I think is realistic? I would like to see, representation in industry match representation in society at large, right? That's the definition of being a minority in a situation. A minority in IT is that your rate of representation does not equal the rate of representation in society in general. So yeah, 50%, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. And do you have any particular advice for women considering a career in data science?
Deep breath. Find a supportive cohort of friends or meetups if you need to. I hate to say be particular about the companies that you work for, but I mean, if you know that it's like, let's say an Uber situation, when you go in, then it's going to be a bad experience. So do your homework on the companies that you're applying to. Don't apply somewhere that's already toxic and you know it. Acquaint yourself with some of the red flags of a company, and I know it's awful, but the thick skin thing is sort of true. I mean, to get through school, or I've interacted with Coder Academy quite a bit professionally and peripherally, and I know that you guys really do try to create a safe intellectual space, and that's really important, but that is difficult to find in some universities and other pathways into data science. So it's really important that you build a good support group, that you find that strength to get through, and it's not always going to be shit. There are good places to work. There's good people to work with.
Absolutely. I think the main work that needs to happen as far as inclusivity goes in the industry is that companies and schools need to start deserving the women that they want to have studying and working with them.
I'm going to be a little bit perhaps incendiary and say that people need to stop being scared of being wrong. And by people, I mean mostly like the men in the industry and even the women, because a lot of the resistance to diversity and to equity and to having these great collaborative relationships is fear of looking stupid or fear of making a mistake and being judged. And until we can sort of get rid of that, it's going to be really hard.
Absolutely. Here. The last question that I kind of have in mind that I wanted to ask you, Doctor, is as data and machine learning changes the way the world in which we live works, our existing notions about knowledge, information, and privacy seem to be changing a little bit. Do you think they're going to become outdated? We talked a little bit about facial recognition before. Do you think people just need to, for instance, believe that their face is going to be recorded and that's what happens in the world?
I don't have a clear answer on this one, but I think we need to adapt to it, and we need to decide as a society where our boundaries are. As far as faces go, if you drive a vehicle, government already has a very, very clear image of your face. If you have a passport, every government has a very, very clear image of your face. I think that people feel it's quite invasive when they're out every day on the streets, and the idea that there's this automatic recognition of you and where you are that's very close to some of the dystopian future movies that we see. And that, there's the very good questions being raised about the efficacy of those and the ethics of those. There's a lot of serious issues with the amount of data and how we're applying it these days. I know that people are very concerned about the privacy aspects of it, but to be honest, at this point, I'm much more concerned about the integration into critical systems than about whether or not Facebook was listening to me through Google Hangouts or through my Android device. We've got machine learning in making justice decisions. Are you going to be released on probation? Are you going to have a longer jail sentence? Are you more likely to be pulled over? Are you more likely to be shot? As a Black man, I'm an American. I know the answer to that, and it's horrifying. Is your medical exam for skin cancer, is that going to be as good of an outcome if you have darker skin than if you were of Euro-Caucasian descent? Even simple things like, is the soap dispenser going to give you soap? Right?
Yeah.
If your hands are too dark, the soap dispenser won't give you soap. Is the Zoom camera going to adjust for the low lighting well enough if you are darker skinned than lighter skinned? These are the sorts of things I think we really need to be up in arms about and address. As far as the privacy goes, it definitely has to be a new set of expectations, because that's our new currency. Right. And I'll try to keep it short, I guess, because this is such a huge topic. But it's not necessarily your data, right? Any more than the $2 you hand over for the cup of coffee is your $2, right? You're exchanging that money for a service. And that's what we do with Facebook. right? We hand over that data for a service, and that's how we're paying for it. It is the currency. And I think we do need to have some controls and expectations about how that transaction is handled, and how that currency sort of gets handed around.
Right. But it sounds that, especially when you were talking about social issues and critical systems, the way that machine learning is being integrated, would you say that your position is that we should integrate it, but that we need to manage very carefully how it's integrated and how it works?
I think in some cases that the integration of it is of vast benefit. X-ray scanning for any sort of health issues is much more effective when done in conjunction with AI. So the combination of AI and human expert far outperforms AI alone. And you see this in many sort of medical instances. In areas like legal domains, I think it needs to be pulled out completely and reassessed from the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's some really important work to be done there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Exciting to hear. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question coming up next for Samanve Karambe. So if it's all right, I might direct one to you, Samanve. You've done some pretty significant science communication work in addition to your professional work in data science. You have a YouTube channel, and as well as working in machine learning, rocket science, and teaching. Do you think that a multidisciplinary approach is best when pursuing a career in data science?
Something that Owen mentioned earlier is that ML at the end of the day is just a tool for enabling applications. And that's definitely something that you find once you go into a data science field, that a lot of it is used for applications across a broad range of fields, which was the primary reason why I got into data science. So I think that's really the way data science has evolved in the current landscape. And back then, I think 5 years ago, when I started in the field of data science, there weren't really any degrees of sorts. So a lot of my colleagues, once I made a start, were also from very multidisciplinary backgrounds. Some had studied, I think in my first job, 2 of my colleagues were each mathematician, physicist, and a computer scientist. So I guess a commonality between all of us was that we were all from STEM backgrounds. And today we're seeing an increase in data science degrees. And now currently my colleagues at Woolies X, a lot of them have data science degrees. And I think now those types of degrees have evolved to encompass the necessary recipes that you need to be a good data scientist, I suppose. I think it definitely takes a long time to get to that unicorn type data scientist, which supposedly companies want to hire, but the reality is definitely far from what they'd expect. You definitely need, a bit of computer science, a bit of machine learning, a bit of maths, and a bit of coding. So it can take a while to progress along that journey and learn each aspect proficiently enough. So I can understand why it's a bit daunting, but that's, I think, the reason why you see a multidisciplinary background for a lot of the people that are in that field. And there's no one degree that can prepare for it. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, that all the resources are out there. You just need to get started. So that's definitely what I encourage new people getting into it. Just get started somewhere. Strategically plan your learning journey. You don't necessarily need to do a degree of sorts. You can just sit down and say, okay, I want to learn a little bit of data structures. Let's learn a bit of machine learning, and combine that with any passion projects you might have. And just be patient. You can't really learn any of this, overnight. I've been trying to learn it all for the past 5 years. There's still so much more to learn. Imposter syndrome is quite real in data science, because you work with lots of smart people with 10, 15, 20 years experience who have done a lot in that time span. So it's okay to have imposter syndrome, and don't really let that hold you back. Just get started somewhere and just trust in the journey.
Fair enough. So it sounds like with a multidisciplinary approach being so common, that perhaps data science is a great career to step into when you're already an established professional, would you say?
Yeah, so a lot of the people that get into it, I think that's one of the advantages of data science, is that diversity of background, which can lend itself to problem solving from very different angles. So if you just had data scientists that were just trained from a computer science perspective, you would really lose out on that diversity. So depending on what type of career you're making the jump from, I think it can be easier or harder to acclimatize to the field of data science. But as some of the other speakers have mentioned, it's about really figuring out what your strengths are and how can you use that to sell yourself as a stepping point into data science, and then just work from there. I think we all have strengths that we're naturally good at or naturally get drawn to. So really focusing on those and how can you leverage those to try to give yourself a step up.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, having watched a few of the videos on your YouTube channel, it seems like you have a bit of a bird's eye view of that employment landscape that you've just mentioned. Do you think there are a few key skills that people need to have to differentiate themselves to employers? Are there certain most important data science skills that employers look for?
I definitely think that I think judging by my journey and my experience in the job market, it's really trying to find things that can help you set yourself apart from the crowd, whether it be, you spoke somewhere or gave a talk at some forum or participated in hackathons or created some really cool side project, and really highlight that. And I'm sure a lot of people are getting into data science with zero experience, and to really step aside, you really need those projects to stand out. And I think at the end of the day, all tech companies or all institutions that are hiring for data scientists, they really want to hire interesting professionals. So, double down on what you're good at and try to figure out how you can use that to sell yourself or market yourself if you be. Don't try to fit into any mold as such. Be unapologetically yourself, really. And that's helped me out quite a lot in the data science landscape. So yeah, start whatever passion project you'd like to, and try to see what are the skills that you can use right now. And I think some of the crucial soft skills that you need as a data scientist, if you're trying to mold yourself as someone that's a good data scientist, is definitely communication is one, trying to be able to translate complex problems or complex solutions into simple terms that you can explain to anyone out there. And that's definitely something that's essential. And you could call that the storytelling skill, really. And more specific to data would definitely be attention to detail. With data, I mean, you're going to be dealing with all types of data. Attention to detail is definitely crucial when it comes to making sense of what types of problems you're trying to solve. What are the solutions out there? What's already been done? What can you do? So that's definitely crucial. And lastly, would be being able to learn effectively. Just be ready to know that some things you don't know as well, and just get down into the books or into any online course or YouTube videos and learn whatever topic you need to on the get-go. I think that's one of the most crucial skills as a data scientist, because there's never a shortage of subject matter to learn. You'll always have someone that is talking about the next algorithm, or just talking about the next data structure problem solving in computer science, or it could just be making a presentation. So there's a plethora of skills out there to be learned. So be ready to get going with your learning. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what jumps out to me from what you've just said is that it seems like one of the key skills a data scientist has is the ability to be comfortable not knowing the answer yet.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. There's so much ambiguous problems you'll be solving, and you just have to be ready to admit you don't know something. All right, let's figure out how to solve it. I think that's definitely the fairly essential skill for all data scientists that I've met, is being good with ambiguous problems and just assuming you don't know something, but let's figure out how to do it. Let's figure out how to solve it. And and we always challenge each other. If you've got colleague data scientists, it's always, anything is fair game. Let's talk about it. Let's see if this is the right approach. So that's definitely one of the best things about data science, in my opinion. Freedom of knowledge.
I think that's definitely one of the things that I've noticed and tried to push in the courses that I've been teaching for Coder Academy is a bit of a barrier that some people seem to run into is that they land in coding or they land in data science or mathematics. Yep. And because they don't yet feel comfortable, they feel like they can't do it.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, I think, and it sounds like you would agree, the most valuable thing that you can do is leap into those situations where you don't yet know the answer.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think the data science community is quite collaborative and it's quite kind. And a lot of the interviews I've gone to, and regardless of how I did subsequently, they would always make sure to give me feedback on how I could improve in the next company's interviews or any other interviews, or how I could tailor my learning journey to learn the concepts maybe I didn't do so well on. So I think the data science community, in my experience in Sydney or just globally speaking, it's been pretty awesome. Yeah.
That's great to hear. You were speaking just a little bit about job interviews just now. Do you think that there's a disconnect anywhere between the knowledge that graduates are approaching the field with and what's required in the field? Is there perhaps the job market or the field is changing in a way that hasn't yet been reflected by education?
Yeah, so I think this was definitely true when I was applying for jobs, like my first graduate jobs a couple of years back, where you would find lots of job descriptions and jobs out there that list a whole bunch of technology that they expect their data scientists to have. It could be Python, R, Java, or things like that. And a lot of those technologies, yeah, sure, you definitely do need them, but it's more important to hire someone that can learn all of those technologies on the get-go. And yes, some knowledge is definitely required, but if you see a job ad that's exhaustively listing every single technology stack that they can think of and they want their unicorn data scientists to have, then they're definitely going to be led astray, because the reality is nobody really knows all of those packages or programming languages to the nth degree or to a very high proficiency. So I've definitely seen that gotten a lot better, getting a lot better in the last 4 or 5 years. So there's a bit more of a reality check, and there's a lot better discrimination between the role of a data analyst, data engineer, and data scientist. Because back then, I think my first position was a data analyst, and I ended up doing a lot of work as a data engineer, data scientist, which I'm grateful for because I learned a lot of skills that I would not otherwise. But yeah, so definitely you'll find out more about that particular job as you go through the interview rounds, and always be sure to really bring up your role early on into the interview process, and just ask them more explicitly what the tasks are, because often I've found the tasks that they describe in the jobs are very different to what they'll want you to do. And it's always good to keep that transparency. And that's another good check for when you're trying to interview for companies is, is that because at the end of the day, you don't just want to work for that company. It's also, what are you going to get out of the company? It's a two-way street. It's like a relationship almost, that you want to end up in a company where you'll grow and that you agree with the culture, and that there's a good environment. So that's definitely important. Just keep that transparency high during that interview process. You find out what the actual role is instead of the job description.
Sound advice, definitely. I think it sounds like the first step is to get some knowledge.
Yeah.
And then and any knowledge, I mean. So
any knowledge, yeah. Just get started.
Start wherever,
yeah.
and then get stuck in.
And many times also in a lot of these topics, you'll definitely know where your curiosity lies and where that curiosity antenna is pointing to, and always pursue that, because that momentum is hard to come by later on once you get distracted. So, you might think, oh, I'm really curious about this particular weather app that somebody built. Oh, let me see how it works. Maybe build something similar. Then, pursue that instead of delaying it. Oh, maybe I'll look at it next week or the week before, because that momentum is so crucial.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Samanvay. I have a question coming up for Natasha Fort, so I might call upon Natasha next. Natasha, in addition to the impressive work that you've been doing with AWS, I gather you've also done some science communication work along the lines of writing a game to help children understand AI. Is that right? And
yeah, that's correct.
Super cool. We've been seeing recently some pretty breathtaking work come out of projects like Google's AutoML and the GPT project, GitHub Copilot, that has AI writing code or creating or optimizing neural networks. Is it the case, do you think, that AI is about to get better at understanding AI than we are? Are we at a risk of losing our jobs?
This is a question that I get quite often, not necessarily in this specific form, but when I meet new people and I tell them that I work in AI or I work in machine learning, they have a bit of a reaction where they're like, "Oh, really? For a big tech company? Yeah. So what should we expect? Are we all going to lose our jobs, or what's going to happen next? Is everything going to be automated?" And I think we're not there yet. I think there is a pretty good consensus in the machine learning world that this general intelligence, or this AI that is going to overtake the world, is definitely not there yet. If you think about what machine learning or what deep learning can do today, it's what we call those very narrow tasks. So it's narrow intelligence, where it can do things that are very, very specific. Like, for example, if you think about, to give you an example of an image, something that deep learning can do on an image today would be simple tasks like being able to identify objects. Can do a bit more advanced things. You can also describe in a very synthetic way, for example, what's in the image, but still very narrow tasks. And if you think about what actually that could be, if you were thinking of this real intelligence, I have this example in mind, and I can't show the picture right now, but if you Google it later, you'll see it. So there is this picture of President Obama, and there is someone in front of him that is measuring its weight. So this guy is stepping on a scale, and Obama is putting his feet on the scale behind the guy. And so it's exaggerating the weight, but the guy that is measuring its weight cannot see it. And everyone around Obama is laughing, right? It's a very funny scene because it's a politician, it's the president of the United States. It's not supposed to be a funny guy or play pranks on people, right? And if you run this image through like some of the most advanced computer vision algorithms today, it's only going to tell you that there is people on the images and probably that they're smiling or that there is positive emotion. It can describe this sort of thing, but to get the whole context about, oh, actually it's the president of the United States and it's something that is quite funny, he's playing a prank on people, And to have this whole context about what's happening, it's really far away. And so if you look at, for example, something like GitHub Autopilot, which you just mentioned, right? It's this tool that is created by GitHub that is providing this auto-completion for code. But it's not just basic auto-completion as you know it. It's this super duper auto-completion where you start typing, for example, the name of a function, and it's going to give you your whole function implemented. Or it could be a class, or it could be almost any piece of code where you write a little bit of documentation with it, and it's going to figure out the whole code for you, or try to figure out the whole code for you. And it's amazing. Like, as a programmer, I definitely want to try it. But if you think about it, it's you have to keep in mind a few things, right? First of all, the suggestions that it's going to make, they're not perfect. They haven't been tested. You don't know if what it suggested is even going to work. What it tool did is it looked at a whole bunch of pieces of code from other people, found the pattern there, and is suggesting something to you based on those patterns that it saw. So you don't really know if what it suggested is even going to work. And so it could be great, but it could also be harmful. And if you think about it another way, you already have access to all sorts of pieces of code through Google, right? And if all it took was just go and copy this piece of code, and I don't understand it, but it's okay, I can just assemble it in a program that's going to work. You know, that's not how it works. You know, as a programmer, you have a lot more intelligence and that you need to figure out how to put the right things together. You need to debug whatever is not in the right way, and being able to do that is still so far away. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't think at this point in time we should be too scared about this general intelligence. It's not on the near roadmap. Yeah,
that's great news. It sounds like you see this as something that's only going to create more jobs in machine learning and data science. Wonderful.
I think so, yeah.
At AWS, you've been working to help different companies integrate data science and machine learning into their business. And I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has brought to light many aspects around data collection, privacy, and the ways that its usage can affect people's lives in different ways. With that in mind, what are some of your thoughts on increasing data literacy across organizations as a whole? Is this something that should have been happening much sooner? Or was it already taking place when the pandemic kicked in that companies started to increase their data literacy?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been taking place before the pandemic, but as some people talked about during this event, it's definitely been increasing with the pandemic, and especially in the latest year with the how the technology is changing. So we have some numbers that we use at AWS that are coming from independent analysts, actually. But we say that, for example, the data that is produced today in 1 hour is as much as a year of data 20 years ago, which is a pretty big difference. And the data that is going to be produced in the next 3 years is as much as the data that has been produced in the past 30 years. So pretty massive. And this is due, if you think about it, this is due to the fact that more and more things are built as digital. More and more companies are moving to digital, and we have a lot of applications and all of that. And the pandemic, I think, for a lot of governments and private institutions, really pushed that digital way. So we saw, like, for example, the government being able to release these apps, for example, for check-in or doing all these sort of things really, really fast, being able to implement these technologies really, really fast, and that collects more data. That's bringing more data. And so, yeah, definitely seeing a need today of building this massive, data lakes or data warehouses, and being able to bring all of that data together to be able to generate insights.
Right. What feeling do you have about the job market at the moment then as a qualified data scientist? Do you think that's, is it an exciting prospect or perhaps just business as usual?
For sure. I think I think it's there is an incredible amount of jobs. When I open LinkedIn, I see the suggestions that I get, and I don't know if it's because of my history, but I can see that there is so many jobs around data and specifically machine learning as well. It's really, I think, an opportunity today to be starting data and coming in this field. You pretty much would have the chance to work for any company that you want on any sort of problem that you want. So I think it's yeah, it's a great place to be, data at the moment.
That's really exciting. We've seen, particularly in the case of AWS and some of the other of AWS's peers out there, that enormous companies that have quite a lot of attendant resources have taken a pretty big place in the world stage when it comes to data. Do you think that's a trend that will continue, or are we more likely to see individual companies get a data division attached to them, or even individuals perhaps working freelance?
Yeah, I think there is two sorts of different aspects, and I think Arwen touched on this a bit earlier. There is the people in machine learning and in data that works on the algorithm, that work on sort of the research of machine learning itself, so making it better. And we definitely see those being conglomerates, sort of big companies like DeepMind and others that are doing a lot of work around that. That's one specific field of machine learning where you need to have this very deep knowledge on mathematics and on understanding all the basics of machine learning. A lot of what we see today, especially in the job market that you will see today, is more these applications of those algorithms. And for that, you still need to have a fairly good understanding of math, but I would say you don't need to go as deep. It's definitely better to understand what you're doing, though. But yeah, definitely not as deep. And for those jobs, it's really about taking the data that's available in enterprises and understanding the mission of the company and being able to apply your skill as a data scientist. So in that respect, I think every organization really should have a data department. Like if they want to drive their mission, we see all companies today that are doing really, really well. They're data driven. And if you're data driven, you're able to provide more services and better services for your customers or your citizens if you're a public service organization. And if you're doing that, that means you're doing great at stuff. So I really think, yeah, to fulfill their mission, every company should have a data department.
Data scientists to rule the world then. Awesome. During this panel, we've had some questions streaming in from the audience, so I might jump to some of those if that's fine with everybody. I have one here for Dr. Griffion from Rajesh. Dr. Griffion, Rajesh asks, Stephen Hawking said, in the future, AI could develop a will of its own, a will that is in conflict with ours. How do we ensure that regulation stays ahead of the growth of AI?
Yeah, so this is coming back to the singularity question, right? Are we going to achieve singularity where AI develops its own will and does away with the human race? And look, the field's pretty split on it. I don't stay awake with the concern that AI is going to become self-aware at the moment. I think, we need to regulate carefully and thoughtfully and purposefully, but without stifling innovation and exploration. It's an ethical hotbed, right? It's like stem cell research. It can have huge life-changing, world-changing impacts, but it has to be done carefully and purposefully and with a lot of discussion, and we can't let fear rule, but we also can't throw caution to the wind and go forward. So how do we just have to actually think critically about things, non-emotionally about things, weigh up the pros and cons, and have a healthy dose of realism. I mean, sci-fi is sci-fi, it's fiction.
That's the fi inside.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hope, it's a goal. I would love to have a teleporter. I mean, that'd be amazing. You know, transporting matter would be awesome. Being able to talk to my house and have a rational conversation would be less awesome. But yeah, I think as long as we're asking thoughtful questions without allowing fear to cloud our perspective, we'll be okay.
Fair enough. It sounds like to you then the solution to ethical issues when they come up in AI is absolutely human application. And you've spoken a little bit about the way that systems are integrated. Would you say that?
I really like to believe that people are at their heart good. And every time I solidify that feeling, I read the comments section on a newspaper article and realize that as long as people can hide behind keyboards, they're not that great. But people building AI are humans, right? They're your mums and your sisters and your best friends, and nobody's sitting down to build an evil, self-aware AI that's going to replicate itself and do away with humankind.
That wouldn't be very profitable, at least. So I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Let's get everyone back on, Oliver.
Yeah, that sounds great.
A bit of a discussion, if you
If
will.
our panelists would like to join us. In fact, I think we have a question here that is kind of directed to the panel in general. And that is, what do you recommend as the first step in data science for a person who wants to start a new career in the field of data? This from Pukar in our comments section. Should I nominate somebody to answer first?
Yes.
Let's say Samanvay, do you have any advice for this person? What's the first step?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the online courses are pretty fantastic. So you can just easily hop on Udemy, and they've got heaps of courses like A to Z of data science or A to Z of machine learning, or even Andrew Ng's machine learning, Stanford. I think those are great courses for introduction to data science. And from there, I think you'll be able to craft your own learning path. Like if statistics interest you, then you'll just jump onto YouTube and have a look at a couple of things. But there's so many avenues you can follow. And you can also get books if you enjoy learning from books even more. There's heaps of great books out there. I think one of the ones I really recommend is Hands-on Machine Learning with Scikit-learn and TensorFlow, which not only just covers theory, but it gets you to code and make a portfolio for yourself and gives you code examples. And I think that's a great interactive way of learning. Yeah.
Very cool. Natasha, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say, so to get started, I think that's what Samanvay said was great. If you get to a job and you start working, I think the best thing to do is look at what is missing and where are people struggling, what are the challenges in your team. So what I see today, for example, is a lot of team, they build machine learning model, and you will have lots of data scientists, typically quite junior, that are building those machine learning models, and then they don't really know how to actually integrate them into an application that is connected to the rest of the world. Looking at where these challenges in your organization and learning these specific skills quite in depth will sort you out. And if you can think about if your company is having those challenges, a lot of companies will have the same challenges as well. And so there will be skills that you can reuse, even if they are not, the mathematics of data science itself.
Very cool. And Anthony Mackley, what do you think?
I think the others have covered most of it. I think what Samanvay said earlier was about trying to find what stream that sparks with you or something you really resonate with. And then, so you might want to have to go on a bit of a discovery and do some research, play around with what you think you're really interested. And then, yeah, just do some research and find a path where you can learn about it more, I guess.
Is there a particular programming language that you think is particularly crucial or key?
Again, it depends. Like my background personally is SQL. I run SQL every day to extract reports, and I guess just setting up maybe just a little small database locally and start playing around is a good start. And again, lots of resources online. Just play around with it, and I think after you do a bit more investigation, it should become pretty obvious.
Absolutely. And Dr. Griffion, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I would like to pop in. I heard a lot of my fellow panelists mention, passion projects or, do a side thing, or like, I get it. And if you have the time and the space for that, that's fantastic and a valuable learning opportunity. But as far as hiring as a hiring manager, I've never looked at anybody's Kaggle scores ever have I looked at a Kaggle profile. GitHub's like occasionally, but if they give me like a cool write-up or something like that, that is definitely something that would make an application stand out. But just a GitHub link, I'm like, whatever. I think that, some of the boot camps are really, really good, but to come out and hone and sell the part that you were really excited about, the part that really sparked your curiosity and that you can demonstrate your learning. Somebody said earlier that you hire somebody who has proven ability to learn. And that's absolutely true, because what you learned 3 years ago is probably pretty obsolete and it's been replaced by a new package or tool or technique. So that curiosity and that, like, I'm going to go learn. If you're coming from a completely different field, veterinary medicine, for example, and you've retooled yourself through a data science bootcamp, you can probably, that's good evidence of learning.
Absolutely. So it sounds like the ability to communicate yourself and to sell yourself is perhaps a really key skill too.
Yeah, I just don't want, especially for women, I think, because we do carry a lot of the caregiving and home care burdens. I don't want them to get the message that, you need to be having a full-time job and taking care of your family and then still somehow carving out time to have this side passion project to be successful, because it's just not true. When you get down to it, some people are super passionate about it and it's their lives, and for other people, it's our jobs. And, we rock up to work in the morning and we leave in the evening and then we go do other stuff. And that is great. That is totally okay. And you can succeed that way.
Hear, hear. Very cool. I've got a couple more questions here from the chat that we can raise. This one was directed to Dr. Griffion, but I think we can open it up to the whole panel as well. From Rick in our chat, I had a question for Dr. Arwin. She had a lot of very positive ethical views on machine learning and data, where it should be headed and what needs to be considered. Does the industry as a whole share the same views, or are there a lot of companies and entities operating on the fringe of the ethical barrier? Why don't we start with you, Dr. Griffion, and then we can go around the room.
I think that where there's money, we're always going to find people and companies operating on the fringe of the ethical, border. Philip Morrison with tobacco products, squelching known impacts of cigarette smoking to continue their profits. We've got, Pharma Bro jacking prices of life-giving pharmaceuticals in the US. It's always going to be there. It's human nature. And we can't really get around that, unfortunately. I think the industry broadly either shares my views or is at least publicly stating that they share my views because they understand that it's important to the public. So fine if we're forcing companies to have public ethics, as long as they're implementing them that's fine. I don't care if they believe in them as long as they're following them.
Fair enough. Anthony Mackley, do you agree there? Do you think that companies are generally holding to the public face that they put out?
It's kind of hard one to answer, actually. Obviously companies, again, are harvesting more data, and obviously they're just going to use that to try and maximize profits the best they can. So, people might be compromised or might be uncomfortable about all the data, extra data we're going to ask about people and track and how much we can do that. Yeah, I don't think that's really a lot of people are aware about how much is going on behind the scenes. So they could probably definitely do a better job of saying, this loyalty card or anything that you go every day, this is what we're using it for and things like that. I don't think there's a lot of regulation about that at the moment. So could definitely push for that in the future.
I suppose perhaps they were doing this even before they had copious quantities of data available to hand. Perhaps this is not a problem with data, but a problem with the way we run business.
Yeah.
Am I getting too political? Natasha, what's your opinion there? Do you think that there's a shadowy hand behind the scenes using our data for malicious purposes?
I think I share the same feeling. I think as Aaron, there is no one that is that has evil sentiments behind the scene trying to make evil use cases. It's a lot of smart people in the industry that I meet, and there is more. I see more and more awareness around the topics of ethics, and more discussions around it. So, yeah, that's sort of maybe at the moment. I think there is positive discussions.
I think definitely we are, as we're seeing increasing data literacy in individuals, it's becoming more well policed on the world stage, perhaps with more people sort of aware of what's going on. So increasing knowledge and increasing learning is only a good thing, right?
We need to train people to read the EULAs.
It's
all there. Like, you're
done?
agreeing to it. They're telling you it's not in plain English. So maybe that's where we need to be legislating.
That's definitely true.
There needs to be a TLDR of this is plain English, what we're doing.
Fair enough. That's a big ask. I'm not sure I have ever read a EULA.
I do.
Folks, I'm hearing that we're coming to the end of our time here. So do we have any final remarks from our panelists? Has anybody got a burning issue that they want to finish with, or any advice for those of the audience out there who are thinking about a career in data analysis, machine learning?
Can I do a shameless plug that I'm hiring ML engineers, not on the science side, but I need some engineers. Reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. This is the time for shameless plugs. Samanve, do you have a shameless plug or a parting word for us?
Just get started. If you're thinking of learning, just get started somewhere and then just see where the journey takes us. And yeah, I mean, if you're interested in any data science related video, you can always check out my YouTube channel. Always creating interesting content, hopefully. Yeah.
Very
that's
cool.
Pretty much it.
Anthony Mackley, any shameless plugs, final words?
No shameless plugs, but I love data, and I think I loved it before it was cool. So it's a lot cooler these days. It's incredible what you can do with it, and it's definitely a bright future ahead.
Awesome. Very cool. And Natasha, any final words from you, Natasha Ford?
Yeah, I think everything that was said, just get started. You're going to be overwhelmed. It's okay if it doesn't really go away. It's fine. And yeah, just keep going.
Absolutely. A shameless plug from me. If you've enjoyed this evening's panel, or you want to learn more about data, if you're thinking about getting that very, very first toehold in the data science world, we've got another event coming up here at Coder Academy, which is a data science taster event. So if you're looking for that, you can find it on our website in the events section. I think Dallas has very kindly just posted a link to it in the chat. I urge anybody who wants to attend their first data science piece of learning, get a little taster about the field, to go and check it out. I want to thank all of our panelists this evening for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to all of you. Some incredible knowledge and some very interesting opinions on display, and I'm really happy to have spoken to all of you. I'd like to thank all of the organizers, Dallas, for sitting in the background and helping us out there, and everybody in the chat for coming along. Thank you very much for attending our event. I can't
you for
wait
having
to
us.
do this again.
Thank you very much, Oliver and Coder
Awesome.
Academy.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Dallas, do we have any final wrapping up that we need to do? Any housekeeping?
No, I think that's pretty much it. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And yeah, I think we'll call it a day and go and have some dinner. But check out that link and join us for the next industry event, and maybe even have a bit of a taste at that data science event. Cool.
Looking